Welcome to the Innovators and Investors podcast. I'm Kristian Marquez, founder and CEO of Finstrat Management. At Finstrat, we provide CFO-led accounting, finance, and reporting services to assist clients monetize their business. Stick around to the end of the podcast and I'll share how you can be our next guest. Now on to the show. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Innovators and Investors podcast. I'm your host, Kristian Marquez, founder and CEO of Finstrat Management. Super excited because today we have with us Ishan Girdhar, who's currently leading a LegalTech studio working with founders. Ishan, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Kristian. Good to be here.
Yeah, our pleasure. Happy to have you on and have the benefit of listening to a seasoned operator, and super excited to hear about the workshop. Probably also it makes a lot of sense, and so much as you've had a successful exit as founder and CEO of Preva that was acquired by Smarsh. So I think great starting point. Would love to hear a bit about your background and what got you to the studio.
Yeah, no, appreciate that. And yeah, the story of Preva was actually pretty interesting. I had a company called Community Health Technologies, a startup that actually didn't work out. And as part of that process, we were selling a product to hospitals and health systems. And so we were on the receiving end of security assessment questionnaires because we were simply connecting to their Wi-Fi network. We had no access to any patient data, no network. We really had access to nothing, but we had to run our TVs, had to connect to their Wi-Fi so that we can push content. That business didn't work out for a lot of reasons, which failed startups are not always a bad thing, but they taught me that if you build it, they will not come. It doesn't necessarily work in startup land. So I went back, got a job, and one of my partners approached me and said, hey, I just started having to fill out security assessment questionnaires, and it was in a Word document, and it came from a Big Four, which means some large enterprise hired a Big Four accounting to do a security due diligence, and they sent them 100 questions in Word. And we're not that smart, but we realized that there's a lot of inefficiencies. It's very expensive to do that. And then this large enterprise probably sent this out to 1,000 different suppliers, and they were never going to be able to run any analytics around that. And so we realized that all this was questions and answers with the packaging around security assessment. And so we built a product called Preva, and we started marketing. We started trying to sell to law firms, to banks, hospitals, and school districts. And we ultimately got 80% of the way there. And we started the company in June of 2016. And in August of 2016, there was a LegalTech conference happening down the street from us. So I reached out to everybody who had security or privacy in their title. And sure enough, our first client ever was a top 100 law firm called Blank Rome. So they took a chance on us. Product didn't exactly work. We sold a managed service to mask that the product didn't exactly work at its full capacity at that point. And we realized that law firms were the most critical vendor that pretty much any company has. And because they service clients in financial services, healthcare, that they were receiving questionnaires. So this process was really standard for them. And that they were starting to go through an evolution of being digitized and using more vendors to make their business more efficient. And so that's actually where we found our niche. We started selling security assessment due diligence to law firms to really vet their third-party vendors. And as you mentioned, we were fortunate to exit the company a little after 5 years. At that point, we had about 25% of the top 200 law firms in the world, a couple Fortune 100 companies as part of our clients. We had only raised less than $3 million. So 2016 to 2021, when money was pretty readily available, we really focused on profitability as much as possible early on. And like I said, fortunate to get an exit to a company called Smarsh, and a great outcome for all of us.
Congratulations again. A lot to unpack. And let's start with this idea of MVP. And so I heard you loud and clear. Initial iteration is managed services. Reflecting back, did you actually find that maybe that proved to be an advantage in so much as it gave you traction while at the same time being able to engage your buyers?
Yeah, it gave us a lot of insight because at the end of the day, when you're a founder, you have tunnel vision on what you believe is the right fit for your clients. And I actually had this conversation today with a founder. I said, get it into the hands of the user as quickly as possible. I said, you have to be prepared to ask for forgiveness. But if you keep waiting till the product's ready, you're going to continually fail. And I said, at the end of the day, the product's never ready. And he actually came back and it resonated with him. He said, yeah, I read about Y Combinator said if your first version of your product's not considered ugly, that means you went out too late. And so, yeah, the goal was, hey, let's get this into this user's hands. Let's hold their hand. We're not going to charge them managed services prices for a software product, but we're going to help do a lot of the work for them. And sure enough, like over that use case, we learned a lot from that user, what worked, what didn't work, what color the button should be, what reports that he really needed in order to present to his boss, to the board. Those weren't things that we had insight. I never could tell what a law firm's C would need to report to the CIO and to the managing partners. So getting that intel from him was super important. And I told you that we originally were selling to financial services, healthcare, and education. Once we got that first law firm, we actually rebranded the entire company's website and all of our collateral to be only for law firms. And I actually put that as probably one of the biggest reasons we were successful is we found a niche, we found our ICP, and we went after it really hard. And from there, one client, one law firm turned into two, which turned into 10. And that was, I think, set the foundation for our success.
Yeah, so I'm reminded of a parallel, but focusing on a niche, I think is underrated. And if you think about Amazon, when Bezos started the company, it was originally the premise was to be the largest online book seller on the market. And now today we know what the organization looks like. And so I think it's actually a great piece of advice that other founders who are listening to this to say you may have a lot of ideas and see a lot of different problems that you can solve in multiple verticals, but getting traction in one is advantageous.
Yeah.
Uh, be-
No, it's so important. One of my mentors, actually, the person, Sid Yanamandra, who actually acquired Priva, I give him all the credit in the world. He knew the day of a life of his clients better than they did. And he went into every meeting smarter than they did, frankly. And he was able to explain why his product made sense for them in that at that time, in their job, in their role. And it was fascinating to watch. And I think we started to get there over time. We knew every vendor in the legal vertical. We knew what 49 other law firms were doing in their space. So we were able to share best practices and really moved a lot of the people in the industry to one uniform methodology. You're always going to have differences, but the foundations of what each law firm were doing, we had a say in it as opposed to letting them dictate how we should be doing our business.
it makes, so as you pointed out, understanding your ideal customer profile, how they think, and understanding what their problems are, arguably is also shortens the sales cycle, which is really important when you're looking to scale. Would love your perspective then on the journey to product market fit. A lot of conversation is had around founder-led sales. What was your experience and how did you think about making sure you were hitting your top line numbers?
Yeah, transition from founder-led sales is the hardest part. I always say that we had the best product on the market and the worst commercial team because I was the commercial team. I often got criticized by our investors that uh, I treated sales and marketing as an expense, not an investment. That was one of the things that Guy Filippelli, who we both know at Squadra, said to me, and that's resonated with me. And I say that statement over and over again to other founders. Once we found a repeatable methodology, what ticked with every law firm. And then when we got out of legal and we started selling to financial services, trying to figure out what parts of the product made the most sense, where they thought there were value propositions in the product that made them more efficient. But then we also found out we leaned actually heavily into managed services. So we had a great software product, but we also realized that we were a nice to have, not a need to have. And so in order to make Priva a need to have, we had to add human bodies to that problem because they didn't want to do all the work. And so it was a tell for us. And that was super interesting. And that was part of our product market fit, was actually having a component of human services on top of a product.
So it's interesting. Sometimes I get the sense that there's a stigma, maybe generated from founders, sometimes board, more often than not, investors that want to eliminate humans from the loop as fast as possible, but maybe not appreciating that it's a process. Did you encounter any of that? Were people saying, "What are you doing? You're compressing your margins"?
We absolutely had that. And what we were doing probably wasn't scalable to get to $100 million revenue company. So we got pushback. They were right, but we also felt we were always going to be a little bit of a disadvantage if we didn't add that. We always ran things lean as a team. So we didn't necessarily always have a lot of the features and functionalities that our competitors had, because some of them raised 50, $100 million. So there's a push and pull. We always took a perspective of, even if we were adding human to the process, a lot of our backlog from a product perspective was to make our humans more efficient also. And so that was how we offset the negative stigmatism of adding human resources. We were making our humans more efficient along the way as well.
And that makes great sense. I'd be curious, did you ever get to a point where you were able to measure retention as it related to the fact that you had something that resembled a relationship in place and not just software?
Yeah, we always maintained over 95% retention rate. We actually didn't lose our first client till year 3, and that was because of an acquisition. So that's something that we're real proud of. We over customer supported. I worked at Disney for a little while, so I learned the importance of making sure that the client's always happy. I know my team probably still curses me sometimes of we said yes before we said no, but the cost of a new customer, as we all know, is a lot more expensive than retaining an existing customer. We definitely made mistakes along the way. We did too much at times. I wouldn't trade it, but I think we needed to figure out how to scale the business a little bit more, knowing that we had to have a body or two extra than a traditional pure play SaaS product.
Tremendous amount of learning experiences, successful exit, and now you're focused on the studio. Would love to hear more about your focus and how you're capitalizing on what you learned within in the legal world in the studio.
Yeah, I think legal's going through a pretty interesting transition right now. My colleague Zach Posner's been leading the charge in legal tech and investing for the last 6 years. There's a ton of opportunity, and I think that understanding that the world of legal is much more than selling to law firms. I heard somebody say at one point that a birth certificate and a death certificate and everything in between is legal. And so we're really able to capitalize on various different aspects of where there's still greenfield opportunities in the world of legal, whether it's mass tort claims and distribution of funds through a mass tort. We found opportunities doing financing of working capital for litigation firms that take on cases in contingency, to connecting wealth managers and law firms in order to either defer taxes around contingency fee wins or divorce case settlements. So it's just such a unique space when you really unpack the world of legal, that it really does touch so many different parts of our lives. And so our goal is really going back to where we talked about with Preva. What are some of the lessons? In some cases, it's really about, hey, this needs to be a software product that makes some element of this ecosystem more efficient. And in some cases, some of the businesses that we're thinking about, maybe just pure cash flow lifestyle businesses that we're able to generate leads, as an example, and create an opportunity for us to do distributions to the investors that we're working with. And so there's not really, I think, another myth in the world of startups, depending if you're VC backed or not. A single or a double is really great. We love being able to find businesses that we may be able to sell or exit for 20, 30, 40 million dollars. That's not a small amount of money. Not every business needs to have a lens of $1 billion or bust. And I think that's what's super interesting about what we're doing and how we're thinking about the world. And a lot of times also we're seeing opportunities with solopreneurs. I have a lot of I have a lot of sort of praise for founders who are trying to go down this journey by themselves. We bring a team that has product experience, sales experience, engineering experience. So we're starting to work with some solopreneurs who just need a partner to lean on and to work with in terms of scaling their business and thinking about, you know, what makes sense for them, whether it's product wise or whether it's from a go-to-market perspective.
And so a whole bunch of great insights in there. Oftentimes, I think you're right. A lot of founders come to the investing table thinking that they have a responsibility to hit a home run, not appreciating that, hey, you can get on base with a single or a double. It's meaningful. But I also think it gets to the heart of knowing yourself. Meaning, hey, if you're gonna, and I'd love to get your perspective, but if you're gonna put yourself out there and look to partner with an organization like yours, hey, it's say as much that you're on board with a single and double and not becoming a unicorn.
Yeah.
And I sometimes get the sense that founders don't appreciate that.
Yeah, look, I think we all want to hit the home run, and there's no shame. And frankly, I think you should always point to the fences, but sometimes be aware of the market economics, the industry economics, the changes that are happening, and be okay with not that there is a middle ground, and that's perfectly okay. And I think I'm going to transition that to that's also you want to be delicate in saying this to a VC, but also having partners from a funding perspective that look, our intention is to go as big as we possibly can, but having VCs that understand that sometimes that doesn't always work. And so having them have the ability to pivot their mindset as well. I think that's also important.
100%. I feel like a lot of relationships would be better places if that was said in the get-go. So with that, so evaluating founders and ideas, what's the lens that you look through?
Just had a conversation with a founder. Persistence, adaptability, and reliability. I think at the end of the day, trust is the biggest factor in this working. When we exited, I look back and I actually said to one of my colleagues, I've spent more time with you than I have with any other person that I've ever dated in my life. Frankly, you've been the biggest staple in my life to date. And it's really true. Um, you're going to go through battle. It's going to be really emotional. The highs are high, the lows are low, and maintaining a good relationship and having that trust that we're going to work together through all of that. You can't blame each other. And if you do blame each other, you got to get over that quickly and move forward. So having a short memory is probably one of the biggest things that I think is important in building that trust to go to work together every day.
How important is it to have been a second time or more founder?
I think it's extremely helpful, but it actually doesn't mean anything. We're still going to make mistakes. Just going through one time doesn't necessarily mean that you learned everything and anything. There's so many variables that are still going to get thrown at you. There is no such thing as a linear line in the world of startups, no matter if you've had one exit or five exits. You're still going to encounter something new that will throw you off your game.
It's interesting. And so the way I think about it is you got to be flexible. You also have to be humble, admit when you're wrong. And I think you hit on it earlier. As you learn, as the market teaches you, you have to be able to and willing to iterate. Which I don't. You'd think I'm just saying it makes sense at this point, but you don't necessarily always see it. The founder's one thing, the problem you're solving and the tech you're using is another. Other big part is just the broader team. Having a studio where you can provide a lot of support is meaningful and material to getting the product market fit. But what guidance would you give founders as they start to get traction and they start to think about who they need to surround themselves with? Are there any disciplines in particular that you focus on first, whether it's the product development, sales and marketing, or other?
Yeah, I think know it's a cliche, but know what your skill sets are and then try to find people who complement them. If you have three people who can do product, you really are not going to move the ball forward. So making sure that you have a good team around you that complements you. I I had a guy named John Lemp who was my CTO and co-founder, and he ran product, and he rarely ever sat in a meeting with sales or a sales call or an investor call. That was very intentional. He
Hmm.
knew his lane, I knew my lane. Then we brought in a guy named Jeremy Mento. What Jeremy did really was he took his role from his perspective was to make my life easier. And he took that role on really serious. And I think that the two of them, and then Carly, who came in and really handled our clients, the four of us were the first four employees and really set the foundation. And everybody knew their jobs, and they knew that you do your job, and then we're going to be able to move things forward in all aspects, because it's really hard at that stage. And so that's one. And then when you think about bringing on a team, controversially, some of the things that I said to people in the interview process was that if you're looking for a job, this is the wrong place. If you're looking for work-life balance, this is the wrong place. That we're going to work hard. We're going to try to have fun doing it. It's not always going to be fun. We have a mission that we're trying to accomplish. And to do that means sacrifices at times. We had Saturday morning sessions when you're preparing for a board meeting. You can't prepare a board deck between 9 and 5, Monday through Friday. So sometimes you have to do those things on Saturdays and Sundays. And when we thought about the core team, that was part of the communication. And I remember times when the four of us had a conversation that said, every hire from this point on is a quote unquote an employee, that they
Hmm.
don't fit into that category anymore, that now we have to think about bringing on people where they're not working 24/7, that they're really here to do a job. And that was a mindset shift once you get out of that core team.
It's interesting. I've never heard it described like that, but it makes, I mean, practically, I know it plays out that way, but thinking about your hiring is another thing. So then did you find that your culture was a consequence of how you were thinking about what needed to be done, or was it, did you approach it deliberately and saying, no, this is, I want it to be a certain way, and I'm gonna mold and shift it that way.
I think it was, I think intentional. We also like to have a lot of fun. I thought building a good team and a culture was important. We did work really hard, but I think we also had a lot of fun. And the team had fun sometimes at my expense. Every Friday afternoon, they had lunch as a team where I was not part of it, and they had a game. And then at our team call to wrap up the week at 4 o'clock, I was the judge. Sometimes I was also the subject of something, but we tried to have fun. We tried to do offsites every 3 or 6 months,
Hmm.
get the team together in various cities. A lot of us worked together in DC, so that was beneficial. But again, during COVID, that's when we started hiring all over the country. And so after COVID wound down, we started making sure that we were having the team together and doing things that were fun so people can get to know each other on a personal level as well.
Well, then you had an opportunity to witness firsthand the impact the remote had on culture. And so did you feel like you had to do anything in particular different other than getting everyone together on a regular basis?
Yeah, just over communication, just keeping them abreast on what's happening. We would, I think they probably could have done without these, but we had a Monday morning call to start the week. We had a Friday afternoon call to close the week, doing things like happy hours with the families, dogs, spouses, etc. I think it's important for people in extended families to understand who's on the other side as well, because sometimes we go home and we complain about a colleague, but you start bringing some personalization, some humanization, bring a face to the name to the people who are seeing, hey, you guys are working hard, and understand that it's not personal. It's all part of something we're trying to do together.
Ishan, been a great podcast, a tremendous amount of insight from a founder and now as an investor running a studio. Before we wrap up, we'd love to know, what advice would you give your younger self as you look back, if you had the opportunity to do it all over again?
I again, we talked about niche. I started my career as a generalist, worked in healthcare, then in media, then investment banking for a little while. If I could go back again, be a master of a particular domain. That doesn't mean like a very tiny niche, but I think if I could go back and do either healthcare services or fintech or some category and really go miles deep as opposed to miles wide, I think that's something that I would have done differently back then.
Tremendous amount of value in being myopic. I'm reminded of analogies where, in martial arts, tremendous value in doing the same thing over and over again before you start to add on additional repertoire to your arsenal, just because it builds muscle memory. And then also find, in my experience, it gives you the ability to better connect dots, because of the familiarity you gain, you accumulate a specific knowledge.
Yeah.
Ishan, if there are any founders who want to get a hold of you or investors, how can they find you?
Yeah, you can email me at Ishan, Ishan at tltf.com, or you can find me on LinkedIn, Ishan Girdhar, Ishan Girdhar. Feel free to shoot me a note.
Fantastic. Ishan, thank you so much. Appreciate you coming on the podcast. It was a great episode. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Kristian.
Kristian Marquez here. Thank you so much for listening to the Innovators and Investors podcast. If you're a successful founder or an investor who would like to be on the podcast, please visit podcast.finstratmgmt.com/podcast-guest. If you've got something out of this interview, please share this episode on social media. If you know someone that would be a great guest, please tag them on social media to let them know about the show and include the hashtag Innovators and Investors. I'd love to see your posts and suggestions. We're regularly putting out new episodes and content. To make sure you catch each new episode, please subscribe to the Innovators and Investors podcast. And your thumbs up, ratings, and reviews go a long way to help promote the show, and it means a lot to me and my team. Would you like to know more? Go to our website, finstratmgmt.com, or follow us on LinkedIn or on X. Our handle is @finstratmgmt. This is Kristian Marquez. Thank you for listening. Until next time.